Hi, Bruce Adolphe with episode 12. David Diamond stood perfectly straight, holding a red Bic pen as if he were about to throw a dart at the target, which was my string quartet manuscript sitting on the piano rack of room 504 of Juilliard in September 1973. With his red pen, Diamond liked to circle individual notes on his pupils' manuscripts, and raising both eyebrows slightly and pursing his lips to look as French as possible, he liked to think he was Maurice Ravel, with whom he claimed to have studied. He would usually say something like, "Don't you think this note is a bit too high?" To which one would reply, "No." And he would grunt and say nothing, and then look for another note to encircle in red. Those were the good lessons. David Diamond was obsessed with fugues. He thought that everyone, especially his students, should write fugues in nearly every piece, since the fugue was the highest form of musical expression. And yet he made it clear that only true geniuses, such as he claimed to be himself, could write fugues worthy of the term. Out came his red pen. He circled not just one note this time, but four, and a gleam came into his eyes, or perhaps it was more of a glare. In any case, the look was like that of a vampire eyeing a healthy throat, more than a composer getting an idea. He said, "These four notes could be a fugue subject." "But this piece is not a fugue," I defended my work. "Those four notes are part of a longer melody. See right there." Diamond grunted, ravelled his lips, and Frenched his eyebrows. "Perhaps it should be a fugue, you see. You should give that some serious thought." Another moment of deep insight and understanding that I would ignore immediately. But there was much more to these composition lessons than notes circled in red ink, fugal entreaties, and imitations of Maurice Ravel. There was colleague bashing. On the subject of his Juilliard colleagues Elliott Carter and Milton Babbitt, Diamond said to me, "Elliott is not a genuine composer, and neither is Milton. They just spill notes onto the page, and neither could write a decent fugue if they had to." Elliott Carter pointed out that some of Diamond's beloved fugues were, in fact, not fugues. It happened at one of our weekly composers' forums. Elliott Carter, Roger Sessions, and Milton Babbitt were sitting with the students when David Diamond expounded haughtily about one of his fugues for several minutes, before Elliott Carter raised one finger and quietly offered an observation. "But really, David, that is not a fugue. It's just a canon. Just because you imitate a melodic fragment up a perfect fifth doesn't make it a fugue. You don't follow through. I mean, David, seriously, I think you should stop calling your canons fugues. There's nothing wrong with canons in any case." After a tense silence, Diamond said, "Well," sounding like Jack Benny, but without a sense of irony. His hands trembled with a mixture of fury and humiliation. Diamond flipped the pages of his score and said half to himself, "David Diamond knows fugues." This unsettling moment, where we saw that the Emperor of Fugue was wearing no clothes, called to mind the scene from Inherit the Wind, in which a discredited and humiliated Matthew Harrison Brady desperately recites from the Bible as everyone filters out of the courtroom. It was shortly after that fateful composers' forum that I decided not to bring any of my music to my lessons. Instead, I would dash off some music that meant little to me, that I could show to David Diamond at my lessons, so he had something of mine on which to draw red circles, keeping my actual composing to myself. In fact, I did occasionally show my real music to Elliott Carter, who never circled notes or suggested that pieces be turned into fugues. but rather he commented on larger conceptual issues such as the music's dramatic narrative, its shape, its character, and the relationship of the details to the larger architecture. Because Elliott Carter was so thoughtful, straightforward, and encouraging, I always felt energized and inspired after meeting with him even briefly. The year before this, I had really enjoyed my freshman year of study with Vincent Persichetti. He played the piano brilliantly, improvising both comically and with great feeling, and he urged me to do the same at the lessons. We conversed at the keyboard through improvisations. But he was also a good, if very fast talker. He would point to a passage in a piece I was working on, and he would ask me, "What else could you do with this? Show me." And I would improvise 5 or 6 possible new ways to extend, affirm, or combat what I had written. And then he would do the same. Persichetti took a sabbatical in my sophomore year, and he was replaced by David Diamond. And so all of Persichetti's students were suddenly faced with the red Bic pen and speeches about fugue. But once I had decided not to show Diamond my real music, I still needed to write something that I could bring to my lessons. It was then that I happened upon some unusable, oversized green music paper that would change everything. This weird paper I found at the Juilliard bookstore. "What is this paper for, exactly?" I asked the young woman at the counter. She said, "It's useless score paper. It's too big and green. Nobody's buying it, so you can have it for free." I took some. When I got back to my apartment, I realized that this large green score paper was hilariously useful as a part of my solution to my David Diamond dilemma. The staves on the paper were so small that if you got close enough to read the notes on the staff, you could not see the whole page. But if you looked at the whole page, you could not read anything written on the staves. Perfect. I thought this would be funny. I put one piece of the paper on the floor, and I walked around the paper like Jackson Pollock, considering where to pour paint. At that moment, I realized I could create a visual piece on it and pretend that it was music. I sketched a somewhat improper visual image on the score paper very lightly in pencil, and then filled it in darkly with notes and haphazard sharps and flats. Then on the left side of the page, I filled in the names of instruments. The paper was huge, with an enormous number of staves, so I had to keep adding instruments as I got toward the bottom of the page. At a distance, the score was a weird and somewhat suggestive drawing. If you got close enough to read the notes, you would know, if you were a musician, that the music was random nonsense. "Come in, young Adolphe." Diamond, for some reason, called me young Adolphe. "What have you got today?" Trying to stay calm and not give away the joke, which I hoped he might find humorous, I unrolled the giant green page of score paper and placed it on the piano rack. Diamond squinted at the page. He stepped forward and peered at the notes as if they were a new species of insect. Then he took a few steps backward and stopped just short of crashing into the window. "This is excellent." "Wait, what? What? He liked it? But what did he like about it?" Then out came the red pen. I held my breath. He walked almost cautiously toward the piano, leaned forward, and circled one note. I looked at the tiny note he had circled and carefully followed the staff to the left with my eyes until at the edge of the page I could see the word trumpet 1. Diamond asked, "Don't you think this note is too high for the trumpet?" I could not believe this was happening. All the notes were ridiculous, arbitrary, meaningless. Without taking my eyes off the page, I answered, I wanted the trumpet to strive for that note. It's an effect. Oh, I see. All right then, he said. He loved this page of music. This is an excellent opening. It soars. Thank you, young Adolphe. This is the best thing you have written since I've met you. Now I understand what you're doing here at Juilliard. He talked on about talent and living up to potential and urged me to continue this piece and to put all my energy into making this the best orchestral work I could possibly compose. Eventually, the time was up, and I said goodbye and left room 504. When the door had closed behind me, I exhaled and leaned against the wall. We had not shared a joke, nor had he become incensed at my prank. Instead, he completely fell for this nonsense. I went home, sat in my bed, and stared into space. I could not possibly write more of this piece. That night, I worked on my piece for tenor and string quartet, music David Diamond knew nothing about, and I would not show him. A piece that several of my friends were going to perform in a Juilliard concert later that month. My plan was to present about an hour of my music in a recital. Would I invite Diamond? He would find out anyway, since all the concerts are posted on the 5th floor just across from room 504. What happened to that orchestral music you had started, young Adolphe? Have you given up on it? I told you it was your best work. It was unbearable. The time arrived for my recital. Diamond was in the audience, looking bewildered and angry, and, as always, he carried a stack of his own scores to force on unsuspecting sopranos and pianists who might, under pressure from such a prominent predator, perform something of his on a school recital. My concert included the piece for tenor and string quartet, sung by the young John Ayler. Soprano Lucy Shelton sang 2 pieces that night, plus there was music for violin and piano and cello and piano, and a piece for bassoon and harp. The pieces were given superb performances by my friends, and the audience, comprised mostly of fellow students, was animated and exuberant in their support. I felt good. Oh, except for David Diamond. After the concert, Diamond positioned himself outside the recital hall and made nasty comments about my music to anyone who walked past him. He said ridiculous things that I heard, like tonic and dominant. That's all it is. Nonsense. Simplistic. Can the boy write a fugue? I think not. He is not a composer. He got in the elevator with some of my friends, and during the 1-floor trip down to the street, managed to insult me in ludicrous ways that were quoted to me by my shocked friends. Diamond must have realized that I had not shown him any of this music at my lessons, and he was determined to get even. He will get even in the next episode. This story continues next week. See you then.